Every year, around the Christmas holiday, magical things always seem to happen. Some things are marvelous and joyful, like visits from Santa or a snowman coming alive. Many people say that they feel the Christmas magic in the air around them. Some things aren't so joyful. Around Christmas every year, kidnappings, murders, and death rates go up drastically as well. Even horrid things like this happen. People often feel, yet rarely do they admit, and they still feel any kind of holiday magic behind it, although it may be dark magic. One of the examples coming from a Christmas demon known as Krampus. The Krampus is well known for countries like Germany and Switzerland for taking naughty children in the dead of Christmas Eve night. On one such account, my name is Eli Rockford. I am currently 7 years old as I write this. I confine this journal as something I can't tell my friends and family because they would never believe me. I am often told that I am very smart for my age because I say things and do things that most kids my age don't. But if I tell a strange story, no matter how hard I get into them, believe me, my parents and siblings just say it's my imagination. Today I looked out my window into the street by our house and saw a man who looked like a shadow with horns. His eyes glowed orange, and seeing him scared me a lot. He was ringing a bunch of bells for something, but I tried just to ignore him and sleep. Then I heard a knock at the door. I went down to see who it was. It was for Mommy or Daddy. But when I got to the door, someone stuck a card through our mail slot and ran off very quickly. The card had a picture of a monster who had bull legs, a tail, and horns on a scary-looking goat head that looked half human. I was scared that it was the same thing in the street, but I don't know what to do. I think I know what it is, but I'm wrong. I showed the card to my dad, and he said it was Krampus. At the bottom of the card it said something Daddy says every year. Krampus punishes bad boys and girls on Christmas, but Santa gives good boys and girls toys. So now I'm not so scared. I always get toys on Christmas, so I must be a good kid. I still didn't tell them the same thing happened on the street. My parents will be gone for most of the night and Christmas morning for tomorrow, as some stupid work thing they both have. We usually have Christmas around 6 o'clock, but we have to wait for Mommy and Daddy to get home first. Mom told Brad, my oldest brother, that we would have a babysitter because she didn't trust him to watch all 5 of us by himself. Mom often let Brad watch us, but we had broke a lot of things in the last couple times we have left alone, so Mommy said that she would get Rebecca to watch us. Rebecca came to the house at 5, and she was pretty, and Brad couldn't stop staring at her. Mommy and Daddy left a couple minutes after Rebecca got there. This was the first time Rebecca had watched 6 kids at the same time before. I don't think she knew what she was getting herself into. My youngest sister Molly, who was free, threw a tantrum after our parents left. Levi and Garrett, my younger twin brothers, who were both 5, started fighting. Brad talked with Rebecca about most of the night, and Rachel got to spend most of our night in her room. My mom and dad said that they would still get Christmas gifts tomorrow, but we have to wait to open them until they got home. We made hot cocoa, but the cocoa maker is broken, so the hot chocolate burned our mouths, and we all got candy canes too. Rebecca started to put us to bed at 8, and finally succeeded at 9:30. Even though she was clearly exhausted and frustrated with us, she told us that she had fun, and that she wouldn't have spent Christmas Eve any other way. I awoke in the middle of the night, about 11, to see a crimson moon, casting dim red glow over the winter snow. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a red object coming towards our house fast. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a red sleigh being pulled by reindeer. I instantly recognized it as Santa's sleigh and ran to hide in the downstairs and waited for him to come down the chimney anxiously. Out of the window to the right of our fireplace, I saw the sleigh fly overhead and heard so many hooves trotting on the ground. I made sure to remain perfectly still and silent as a mouse. I waited what felt like an eternity, while soft footsteps echoed on the roof above me. Getting closer to the chimney, I heard scuffling as ash and dust started to fall from the fireplace. Soon, 2 black boots landed, and the rest of jolly old Saint Nick came through the fireplace with a bag of toys on his back. Without speaking a word, he went straight to our tree. He took the gifts from his bag and scattered them around our lit-up plastic evergreen, then started on the milk and cookies we left for him. I felt that I had held my breath the entire time, as I was hiding in the stairs. I couldn't believe I was spying on the real Santa Claus in my hometown. Eventually, he made his way over to our stockings and started pouring various knickknacks and candies into our stockings. As starting with Molly, when she had got to Levi, he took out a small black rock and eyed it sadly before placing it in Levi's stocking. It took me a second to realize that he gave Levi coal. I decided to stifle a laugh to the best of my abilities, but a small squeak escaped my lips anyways. Santa turned and scanned the room. I remained as still as ever. He turned back to the stockings, this time keeping his back to me, and put a piece of coal in Garrett's stocking too. He finally put a candy cane in Brad's stocking, along with the pocket knife. Rachel got a new phone and some Kit Kats. Finally, he moved to my stocking, which was the furthest to the right. Even though I'm the middle child, he began rummaging through his sack, and I leaned excitedly to see what presents I was getting. Santa pulled out a large jet black piece of coal and stuffed it into my stocking. I felt a wave of anger, sadness, and regret all at once. I almost stood upright to tell the jolly old elf, but when he turned around, I saw tears in his eyes. He looked as if he was filled with similar emotions as I. Like he didn't even have time to give the bad kids coal. It was for this reason that I remained quiet as Santa climbed back up the chimney and got into his sleigh and flew away. I watched out downstairs window as the sleigh flew from the roof onto the black abyss of the Christmas night. I sat there still in place for a long time, pondering on how I could be a better child next year. When I stopped something out of the window again, I spotted. It looked like the same figure I'd seen before. This time the sleigh looked as if it was black. I wrote this off as it was really dark outside, except for the moon red glow. I wondered why Santa would come back. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe I wasn't naughty and he was on his way back to fix his mistake. My mind was racing throughout the other, as I began to hype myself for all the possible Christmas presents. I'd stopped watching the window and had begun to daydream about it the next morning, until hooves on the roof interrupted my thoughts. I heard a loud, heavy cackling at this time as he got closer to the chimney. Ash began to fall down the chimney, creating an ashy cloud throughout the fireplace of what I assumed to be Santa, beginning to come down and landed with a loud crash. My final thought before seeing what comes next: how has no one noticed all this? Though a thick cloud of smoke, black ash protruded from the large two horns, and with stripes of red and white, like those candy canes. As the dust settled, the rest of the figure was revealed. His skin was pale, icy-looking blue. His beard was like Santa's, except it was black and came to a point. His nose was so long, and his face looked grizz, but more human than I thought. His horns looked like they had touched the ceiling as if he jumped. His body looked down in an inhuman shape, but the animal in his appearance. His legs were twisted and ended in hooves, like that of a cow or a bull. He had a long tail. His torso was contorted, and everything about his face and his palms was covered in fur. He had broken the chains around his wrists, what looked like heavy red Christmas ornaments, attached to his tail by another chain. His ears were pointed, so were his yellow teeth. Despite his horrid, outlandish appearance, the most noticeable things about the creature were the bells that it wore, and the basket on its back had the limp arm of a child hanging from it. The stories were true, and so it was Krampus. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had seen sleighs go by, magic reindeer overhead. I haven't seen Santa Claus himself, but none other than could have been prepared for the beast, that is, Krampus. He moved around the room in such a speed that I was caught off guard. This thing looked about 8 feet tall without his horns, and with them, he towered over everything in the large room. He made his way to the fireplace and took the coal from Levi's stocking, rolled it around along bony fingers for a moment, then took the coal from Garrett's stocking, and finally mine. He studied for a moment. A wide smile full of pointy, yellow teeth beamed across his face. "Naughty little children," I heard it say in a cold voice, raspy voice. A shiver went up my spine, and as he spoke, I was paralyzed with both fear and awe at the sight of the creature that roamed my living room beneath me. I thought I was moving towards the tree, but as it walked past, it started going down the hallway too, into Levi and Garrett's room. I remember the things my father used to say about that he whips bad kids and takes them away. Sometimes he eats them. Sometimes he shakes them and scares them into being good. All those horrid thoughts and more danced throughout my head as the monster crept into the twins' room. I tried to scream with all my might, but no sound would escape my mouth. Finally, I was able to choke out, "Levi! Garrett!" Screams had already filled the room. Levi came running out of his room, screaming his head off as Garrett followed suit. The creature's long, twisted arm reached out from the room and grabbed Garrett's leg, pulling him back to the room. I stood up from my spot as the stairs were motioned for Levi to come to me. Garrett's screams fell silent. The Krampus emerged from the room alone. His nose seemed shorter now, his face even more deformed now. I gripped Levi's hand tightly, and we ran for both Brad's room. I wailed at his door again and again, but he wouldn't come out. I would have tried harder to get his attention, but I could hear it coming up the stairs as each hoof hit each step. I took Levi to the laundry room and told him to hide in the laundry chute. Once he was inside, I began lowering the laundry hamper so he could get downstairs without confronting the monster. Before he was lowered out of sight, I told Levi to go start the hot cocoa maker, because I had a plan. He nodded, and once we got to the bathroom, I felt the hamper getting lighter as he climbed out. I heard the hoofed footsteps getting louder and louder closer to the laundry room. I began pulling the laundry hamper up and climbed in, just as the door was violently flung open, despite the locks on it. The beast had licked his lips with a long, skinny tongue as he approached the trembling body inside the hamper. I began to bounce myself up the rock of the hamper as Krampus got closer and closer. The hamper wouldn't fall no matter how hard I rocked it, and the creature was nearly upon me. I felt its breath on me as excitedly as it panted, getting closer. I expected its breath to be hot like that of a dog's, but instead it felt like the coldest winter chill, caressing my skin. I shook the whole hamper savagely as I could, before finally budged. The hamper fell, and before I knew it, I was on the first floor. I crawled out of the chute and ran towards the kitchen as the demon rampaged upstairs. As I came to the kitchen, I noticed no signs of my little brother, but I did see the hot cocoa maker was on. The stomping of the creature upstairs continued, but didn't seem to be near the stairs, so I focused on finding Levi. He wasn't hiding in any of the cabinets, and he wasn't anywhere in the living room. I decided that he might be in his room, so I quietly crept into it slowly, but steadily. The twins' room was trashed entirely, and Levi wasn't there. The print was smeared on the wall by the door. Dread was all but I felt in that moment. Dread for misbehaving all year. Dread for what I had become of my little brother. And dread of silence that fell in place of hooves stomping around upstairs. I quickly and silently made my way back to the kitchen and took out a large coffee pitcher, scalding hot cocoa. As I made it out of the kitchen into the living room, I had an obnoxious feeling of dread as if I were being watched. I could barely see in the dark of the night, and I could locate our light switches, and the only source of light I had was the dim, eerie glow of the lights from the Christmas tree. As I scanned the entrances to the dining room, something moving caught my eye. The chandelier had begun to start swinging, as if something had bumped it or hit it. It was a soft thudding that accompanied by the squeaking of the rocking corona. As I looked around to make another vague shape in the glow of Christmas lights, what I saw that bumped the chandelier. The monster was crawling on my ceiling with like a large twisted spider. Its arms were bent in excruciating looking ways to grip the ceiling and watch me with eyes that burned like fire. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs at the very sight of it, but instead I held my ground. A cruel smile spread across the face of the predator who was stalking me. as he undid his fingers from the ceiling and landed on the floor in front of me, with a thunderous crash mere inches away from me. This was his mistake. I threw the entire pitcher of burning hot cocoa onto his face, and the beast immediately started writhing in agony. He covered his hands over in his quickly blistering face. He took his hands off of his face as he began to melt and peel off, and the bits of flesh and blood melting away to reveal his horrible skull, with its eyes still in their sockets. It froze for a while, and for a brief moment, I was happily assured that Krampus was dead, but only it started cackling an awful and disturbingly malevolent laugh. It pierced my ears like knives, and loomed over me to instill as much fear as it could. It was working. Before my very eyes, the muscles around the creature's skull started to grow black and through in seconds. Its new face had formed. It looked more like a goat than a pointy teeth and a human, but you could still partially see it in there. Its beard was still long as before, but now it almost looks like if it was out of place for the demonic beast's head. I turned and ran behind the Christmas tree, avoiding the abomination's lanky arms as I ran by. The Krampus immediately started coming towards the intent tree on harming me. I pushed a large plastic evergreen on the monster and ran back upstairs to find my little brother. I wailed on my siblings' doors, but no one would wake up no matter how hard I pounded on their doors. Everyone locks their doors to their rooms when we go to sleep so we're not bothered. But the doors were also very heavy and not much sound could get through. As I began to shout for Levi as loud as I could, hoping he would respond. Then Levi appeared at the top of the stairs and we stared at each other. He looked terrified and sad. I started to walk up towards him when suddenly my baby brother was impaled by the Krampus's horns. His body was thrust up and thrashed around by the savage creature as he convulsed and shook spastically on its horns. I've seen people die on TV before, but watching it in real life is different. No one would have gone through it. My brother didn't deserve that. No one deserved that. Santa and Christmas are about love and cheer. Krampus made Christmas about hatred and retribution. I watched helplessly while the thing ripped my brother's shaking body from its horns and dropped its lifeless body into the basket on his back. The demon began to strut towards me with the malicious intentions, but I ducked into Mom and Dad's empty room and opened the top drawer on my dad's dresser. I wasn't tall enough to see what I was reaching for, but when I felt it, I pulled out my dad's pistol. I opened the dresser and had put 2 bullets in the pistol by the time the creature burst open the door. I shot it twice and it hit both times. It was unfazed by the bullets. The loud noise clearly heard both our ears as the monster crawled out of his ears while screaming in pain. I began to quickly crawl towards the window until something long, thin, tight, and slimy gripped my right leg and began pulling me back. I looked behind me, and to my terror I saw that Krampus was using an incredibly long tongue to pull me towards his mouth, full of sharp, jagged teeth. I began to breathe in and out quicker and quicker, and began panicking as my foot got closer to its mouth. I tried lifting my leg and kicked it in the face twice before its tongue finally loosened. Before I could breathe, Krampus picked me up and began shaking me wildly. I kicked him the second time, this time with my right foot, and he flung me into the hallway where I began limping away. I had reached the end of the hallway when I heard a loud popping crack sound, moments before feeling a sharp sting across my back. I looked and saw that the holiday devil had whipped me like a whip from a lion tamer would use. I felt the warm ooze onto my back as new pain started settling in. I started to limp away safely when I was picked up by Krampus again. His long cold fingers wrapped around my back and stung my cuts even worse. He looked at me, right in the eye, before lifting me behind him and dropping me into the birch basket on his back. On the outside basket, it looked as if it could only fit a couple of kids in there. But inside was a massive. I fell into the mountain of bodies. There were hundreds or thousands of kids in one basket, piled onto each other, all not alive. Where you can't all see the kids, which is made up the trembling sound. You can only saw darkness. No sounds could be heard from inside or outside really. Kids would either scream, mutter, shout until their throats are clearly hurt, but no sounds came from their mouths. Every time I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, it got way worse. I waited what felt like a millennia to escape, as the kids would fall and join the confusion and show how much time passed. Eventually, Krampus reached into the basket and began to pull out another child. His arm became larger as he reached into the basket and stretched out to a panicked girl. I grabbed onto her leg and let myself be carried into salvation. When we were pulled from the basket, I let go of the kid and fell behind Krampus. He didn't notice I escaped. He was focused on the girl, and he looked at the girl for a second before biting into her flesh with its sharp, large teeth. I never knew the kid's name before the creature devoured her, but I owe her my life for trying to escape, helping me escape. I backed away slowly from Krampus as he feasted on my fellow child at its dinner table. I had no idea where I was now, but it was dark and cold. I think it was where the creature lives. After the monster was finished eating, he picked up the small wooden box and opened the top and spat something into a glowed bright green into it. He then looked at the box over to a rusted doofus that he opened, entered then a small few minutes later without the box. He then left the room, leaving the child's remains on the large platter and rusty door to my curiosity. I opened the door to see dozens of more wooden boxes. I also saw many creepy-looking porcelain dolls and other creepy things. The door behind me closed, and I was engulfed by total darkness. I got out my phone to use it and barely light my way. I walked past the Jack-in-the-Box with a scary face. I walked past a baby doll that looked like a wither and old. I found a sack doll that looked like a creepy rotting skeletons too. I thought it was like Santa's rejected toy shop until I found the word Misfits smeared in red paint next to a clown with a skull for a head, blue eyes in its sockets with big fleshy hands. I was terrified that someone else was caught in that room before. When I got closer to the clown, it jumped towards me and yelled, "Wanna play?" I got really scared and jumped back as the clown let out a scary laugh. I heard the scurrying and tiny footsteps from the other toys all around. I started catching the dolls and gingerbread man, turning their heads as I ran along the walls, trying to relocate the door. I found another message on the wall. "Why can't we all die?" Was scratched into the wall by something. I wanted nothing more than for this night to end. When I located the door, I bolted forward to it and I saw it, but tripped behind a toy soldier with realistic burns on half of his face. I kicked the tiny hunk of plastic away and moved closer to the door when a deformed baby doll a bit appeared in the darkness and sank her teeth into my leg. I felt a surge of pain and fell to the ground. I furiously punched the doll's head repeatedly until it unlocked its tiny teeth from my flesh. The porcelain atrocity scurried off as other trembling toys danced around me in darkness. More and more of them kept popping out and coming out of the boxes, like the ones Krampus spat into the glowing thing into. The toys began muttering words, and I couldn't make out any of what they were saying. Muttering got louder and louder, until I understood some of their words. "Feel our pain. He killed us, but not entirely. He gobbled me up and spat me into the soul puppet. Kill us. Let us die." The things they said terribly dreadful to say the least. I got up and started to make my way to the door as the dolls chanted more obscure things to me. We're gonna eat you alive like he ate us. I'm gonna rip out your eyes." Although they continued to chant, some more of them came towards me again as I moved around the dark room. I saw a small toy skeleton in the Santa's clothes and a beard moved by a puppet with tiny nails sticking out of its wooden, and its head was strung to the ceiling, wrestling with its strings. I spotted a stool that was pulled up at a workbench with tools and a teddy bear on it. The teddy bear had real bear claws sticking from its paws and real human teeth from its mouth. I reasoned that this was Krampus's demented toy shop and decided to leave before it was too late. I walked past the bench to the door and started pulling on the rusty metal handle. The door was extremely heavy, but slowly budged as I started opening. as I pulled back with all my might. Light began to bathe the room, and misfit toys dashed into the shallows to avoid the light. I ran into the dark room, closed the door behind me, and leaned into it for a while to catch my bearings. I looked around at the tiny other room, and in the other place that was familiar to me. I went along the table with the monsters and ate the nameless girl at, trying not to think about it, trying not to think of something, anything to distract me from the horrors that I have bared witness on my most unsuspecting and happiest times of the year. I walked into an open door and poked only half my head out to scan the perimeter of the room. It led me to a large room that had various whips, saws, and various other torture devices. I kept it in and kept it to the wall. I spotted 3 dark wooden doors amongst the darkness and the concrete walls. I also found a window, and the snow outside was falling so slowly, so peacefully. 2 doors were on the large wall, opposites of the window, and the others were on the wall, right to the right of the door window. I tried first on one of the doors along the wall, but had decided beforehand to go to the door right of the window, thinking it would lead me closer to a door out of something. The walls were lined with cracks and racks that were in line with the hellish masks. Some had red horns, some had weird skulls with antlers, and the antlers had lit candles on them. It was so strange. The room was so large. The door led me to the same room. I left without moving the door, in fear of that closing the heavy door would create a noise that would lead to the creature to me. I walked alongside the wall to avoid the equipment, straight only the door I had left. I opened the door slowly with the caution. The first thing in the room I noticed was a strange tree that looked like upside down purple Christmas tree. The trunk was at the bottom, but the pines and branches looked upside down. The tree was decorated with red and green lights and small bones. There was a window in this room, but this was on the same side as the last. There was an open doorway that led to the hallway that had teed off, and the 2 signs labeled directions. The right one said surveillance room, and the left one said stables. I went to the stables, thinking I might be able to find a reindeer to fly out of that place with. It seemed like a silly plan now in hindsight. I opened the stable door, and awful smells invaded my nostrils immediately. There was frost on the floor as well. There were 8 stables lined up the walls to the right, each with demonic reindeer heads sticking out. Below the head was each stall with each pendants of names on them. I read the names out loud as I started down the road. Each deer was grotesque in their own right. 2 or 1 had exposed skulls. Each had jagged teeth and some manes, and some others had dried blood on their fur. 7 of their eyes glowed red. Slasher, I said, past the first one. Wraithful, Gorgon, Putrid, Cyclops. Cyclops was missing one of the fiery eyes. Rabies, Goner, the last monstrous reindeer that looked like a hellish Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. His head had flames that danced and glared his snout at the back of his mane. Between its sharp, bloodied antlers, fiercely flickered bolts of electricity. Blitzkrieg. I decided that ride in one of those was out of the question and began searching for an exit. I realized the only door to the room was the room I came from. I looked all over the room, looking for some other way out, when I saw another reason of the cold. The top crease and upper part of the wall was missing and led outside. It was far too high to reach. I left the stable room and went to the surveillance room, and felt icy cold as I slowly opened the door. The room was all like a rest, was large. One wall was covered with monitors. The bottom middle monitor stuck out more than the rest, had a keyboard below it. A chair was also pulled up to it. Each screen had various kids on it, some dreadful conditions, others minding their own businesses. No sounds came from the monitors, but I started to notice that I was hearing a ticking noise. A clock above me, which read 5:45 Christmas Day, didn't start in my house till 6 o'clock. The walls in the opposite monitors had many names scratched onto it. Wondered if the dead girl's name was scratched on the wall. A door had read exit was to the right of the monitors, but the computer said search name. I sat in the large chair and typed in Garrett Rockford. A nutcracker had two bodies attached from it to both sides of its head popped up. Each body seemed to have tried to yank away from each other, as its face looked like if it was in pain, and it had the same color eyes as Levi and Garrett. I looked up Levi Rockford, and the same thing popped up. I sat frozen for a minute. Tears filled my eyes and ran down my cheeks. The tickling of the clock seemed to have turned into clopping as I sobbed. I was crying more than ever I cried before. I cried so hard I began hearing a ringing. Then the chair, I was spun around and was face to face with Krampus. He looked menacing and indiscernibly sinister. His horns were partially covered in blood. His long fingers looked sharp, and his eyes burned like they never before. He waved his long, sharp, pointy, bony finger at me and tisked. "Naughty, naughty," he said crudely and mockingly. He licked my face with an incredibly long tongue and began to wrap around my throat. He started constricting his tongue and choked me. I was gurgling and coughing and struggling as it closed to nothing. I started feeling weaker and weaker as my head heated up and the lungs screamed for air. My vision even started to become blurred. Then I knew if I wasn't going to do something quickly, I was going to die. I punched him in the face with all my might and knocked him back for only a brief moment as his tongue recoiled into his mouth. I utilized my time and ran towards the exit. I felt the ground shake directly behind me before the heavy hooves shook the floor violently in their wake. I felt the creature's cool breath on the back of my neck. I pushed open the door and ran into the freezing cold as my pursuer followed suit. I ran until I was knee-deep into the snow, but a lanky hand gripped me and started dragging me back. The dark sky slowly lit as the sun started to emerge from the bottom horizon. The Krampus stopped dragging me, and he dropped me as he briefly stared at the rising sun. "I'll come get you again," he said, as he dropped my leg and retreated to his lair as I laid in the snow. A silhouette figure came out from the distance. I closed my eyes what felt like seconds, but when I opened my eyes, the sun was higher than the sky, and the figure was closer. I could make out that he was wearing red. I then passed out again. I opened my eyes to see an outstretched hand with black mitten on it. It belonged to a fat bearded man with a silly hat. "Santa?" I inquired. "Shh, child," he said in a soft, soothing voice. "Let's take you home." The next thing I remember was waking up in my bed at home. Levi and Garrett were kidnapped in the middle of the night. I found out Rebecca, Brad, and Molly, who were already told their parents and the cops. I tried to tell them what really happened, but no one believed me. They only got mad when I tried to explain to them, so I gave up on trying to tell them. That's how I spent my Christmas.